June is Pride Month for the LGBTQ community, and it's a special Pride celebration to boot. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots in Manhattan's Greenwich Village. The event, widely seen as launching the modern gay rights movement. New York will host World Pride this month to commemorate. Even President Trump is weighing in, tweeting about Pride Month and calling for homosexuality to be decriminalized around the world, but saying nothing about gay rights in America or his policies that impact that community. But believe it or not, that tweet still made history as Trump became the first Republican president to ever recognize Pride Month. Still, one trans activist was far from impressed. Army vet and now spokesperson for the Human Rights Campaign, Charlotte Clymer, fired off a series of tweets in response to the president, coming to this point. There's too much this White House has specifically done against LGBTQ people. They are aggressively going after our community with everything they've got. The myriad ways in which Trump and Pence have systemically attempted to harm and erase LGBTQ people. Everything else, she writes, is noise and propaganda. These two hate us, and his BS tweet is a poor attempt at sleight of hand. So what are the facts and the policies behind that provocative conclusion? For that, we turn to the author of that tweet, Charlotte Clymer. Charlotte, I've been looking forward to talking to you ever since I read your response to President Trump's Pride Month tweet. And one of your responses, you said that he's seeking to harm and erase LGBTQ people. My first reaction to that was thinking, well, Charlotte's just going over the top here. But you cited example after example after example to back up that point.
That's right, Andrew. How are you doing today?
Very well. You?
I'm doing not so great because it's Pride Month and we have an administration that is aggressively attacking LGBTQ rights and livelihoods in this country. And
I was wondering, I went through the tweet list that you put out and I found some examples, including one where you noted that the administration has ordered HUD to permit emergency shelters to deny access to transgender people who are homeless. Some 20% of the trans population winds up homeless at one point or another, don't they?
That's correct. In fact, trans people, specifically trans people of color, are the most vulnerable group in the United States to homelessness.
And so what's the likely impact of denying access to homeless shelters for trans people?
So this puts trans people at an increased risk of violence and discrimination in the public square. If trans people can't find jobs because they can't be hired for being trans, if they can't access local services, if they can't seek emergency care in terms of food or shelter, it puts them at greater risk of death or serious injury. And so this is a needless rule that has no basis to fundamental safety for anyone involved. And what's telling is that so many groups, including women's organizations, have come out against this proposed rule and said that trans women are women and absolutely belong in the shelters that align with their gender identity.
Another example from that tweet list that was the Justice Department filing a brief saying that federal civil rights laws do not protect LGBTQ people from discrimination. I think that caught a lot of people off guard. I'm wondering about you. Did you think that LGBTQ people were protected under current civil rights laws?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we know this because of how many times the Supreme Court and lower federal courts have ruled in favor of LGBTQ rights under existing civil rights laws. To say nothing of the same-sex marriage ruling in 2015 with Obergefell, a Supreme Court majority led by Justice Kennedy validated same-sex marriage, but also other civil rights laws in terms of employment and discrimination in schools. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court kicked down a lower court ruling that validated a school district who wanted to ensure that trans children had access to public facilities within the school district. And so we know that the civil rights laws cover trans people and LGBTQ people in general, but this administration is trying to claim erroneously that they do not. And so we're trying to push back against that because it puts people in such increased danger based on their gender identity or sexual orientation.
And you're saying they're not just trying to deny rights to LGBTQ people and trans folks in particular, but specifically seeking to do them harm.
Yes. Yes. And I say this because of the egregious manner in which they've gone after LGBTQ people. This isn't just about a lack of ensuring that LGBTQ people have protections, because that's a whole other discussion. For example, in 30 states at this very moment, LGBTQ people can be fired for being gay, transgender, lesbian, bisexual. They can be denied services. They can be denied credit or housing. That's one argument, right? That's a whole discussion of rights. But then we have the ways that the Trump and Pence administration have aggressively gone after LGBTQ people by restricting existing rights. We see this in the way that Trump and Pence have attempted to ban trans people from the military against the expert advice of military leadership, budget analysts, medical experts, in the U.S. Congress. We see that in the way that they have denied trans children who have gone to the Department of Education with civil rights complaints. We see it in the way they've erased LGBTQ people from surveys, from the census, and certainly from studies that have tried to track the American populace in general. And this even goes down to them ordering the Centers for Disease Control to ban the word transgender from official reports. So this is a whole widespread effort by this administration to attack LGBTQ people.
You mentioned the trans-military ban. President Trump, while he was in the UK, actually got this question from Piers Morgan, of all people, asked if he was supportive of the community, as he tweeted he was, why he would ban transgender people from serving in the military. I could not make any sense out of his answer. Maybe you can as we listen to it now.
If you feel that protective of the LGBT community, why did you feel the need to ban transgender people from serving in the US military?
Because they take massive amounts of drugs. They have to. And also, and you're not allowed to take drugs. You know, in the military, you're not allowed to take any drugs. You take an aspirin. And they have to. After the operation, they have to. They have no choice. They have to. And that you would actually have to break rules and regulations in order to have that.
Charlotte, servicemen and women are allowed to take drugs in the military. Morgan pointed out the military spends far more on Viagra than it does on hormones for trans service members. What's your reaction to that answer?
It's atrocious. It shows how much that Donald Trump has failed to understand the military that he supposedly looks over as commander-in-chief. Trans health care, and the Department of Defense has already studied this, would constitute a fraction of a % of the entire healthcare budget for the U.S. military, to say nothing of the entire military budget. And as you pointed out, and as Piers Morgan pointed out in that interview, we spend nearly 10 times as much, and that is an actual figure, 10 times as much on Viagra and other erectile dysfunction drugs as we do for trans health care. And, you know, Viagra and other ED, I mean, that is totally medically necessary, and I validate that. But it says a lot about this commander-in-chief that he is failing to listen to his military leadership and his civilian leadership who are in the Pentagon, who have clearly stated that the cost of trans-related health care has no burden whatsoever on the military's budget overall. And this is also striking coming from a commander-in-chief who wanted to organize a $92 million parade in downtown D.C. last year. And fortunately, Cooler had stepped in and told them not to, but the cost of that parade would have funded transgender-related health care for the next 30-something years. And so I don't take it on good faith that Donald Trump cares about this issue, and it's the idea that of him blatantly lying on foreign soil about trans people who are bravely serving in uniform.
There's an underlying question, Charlotte, in all of these issues, which I don't... Why do you think this president, this administration, continues to go out of its way to target the LGBTQ community and especially transgender people? Why are they targeting you?
You know, I ask myself that question a lot because when you look at American people who are suffering from lack of jobs, lack of access to health care, who want to just put their kids in schools and make sure they grow up in a safe environment, that's all Americans, not just LGBTQ people. It's very strange that this administration is distracting us with these baseless, needless attacks on LGBTQ people. I personally look to Mike Pence and the way that he has spent his entire career attacking the rights and livelihoods of LGBTQ people. He did it in Indiana, he did it while he was in Congress, and he got a lot of pushback for that. And you can see his fingerprints on all of these policy initiatives that the Trump and Pence White House have taken against LGBTQ people. It's completely unnecessary, and it goes against the will of the American people. 7 in 10 Americans believe that LGBTQ people are entitled to non-discrimination protections. 7 out of 10 Americans believe that this trans military ban is completely unnecessary and a threat to national security. And so it doesn't say a lot about this president's pulse on the will of the American people, that he continually goes after people based on their gender identity and sexual orientation. It's an enormous distraction that hurts everyone involved.
Finally, Charlotte, this is Pride Month, and it's the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, so it's got extra significance, extra attention. Beyond showing up to Pride events, what would you like to see supporters and allies of the LGBTQ community do? What's the best way that we can help and show support?
Well, I greatly appreciate allies who just say that they're allies, right? I mean, that's an enormous role of visibility and representation. But I would like to bear in mind that, 8 black trans women have been killed in the United States so far this year. 26 trans people were killed last year, 29 the year before that. And what we really need right now for allies to do is to call Mitch McConnell and make sure that he brings the Equality Act to the floor of the U.S. Senate. The Equality Act would make non-discrimination protections legal at the federal level and ensure that no one in the United States, regardless of who they are, suffers discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. The fact that you can drive from San Francisco right now to New York and the rights to which you are entitled as an LGBTQ person will change multiple times is unacceptable in this society. And so what I want allies to do is just bear in mind that this has an enormous human cost to folks who are queer, and especially people of color and persons with disabilities who identify as LGBTQ. And so it's very important that we talk to Congress and make sure that they're fighting for non-discrimination protections and ensuring that discrimination has no place in this country.
Charlotte Clymer is a spokesperson for the Human Rights Campaign. She's also a terrific follow on Twitter. Charlotte, really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it.
And up next, we'll pivot to presidential politics and the latest on the 2020 race. We've got a big 180 from Joe Biden, a Buttigieg bump, and Beto might have to let go because he is sinking like a rock.